Hi everyone, welcome to Dancing into Maturity. I'm continuing my conversation today with Amanda Pooley Brand from APB Dance in Melbourne, where we're moving from the idea of marketing and demographics into how it actually affects our perception and the way we are perceived in society as belly dancers, particularly in a professional sense, but this relates to everyone across the board. What do you see as the main difference between the way belly dancers perceive themselves as opposed to women in general society? I know that's a big one too.
And it's an interesting one because I think it depends on our level. For the new to dance dancers that come in, a lot of them have got zero expectations on themselves because they've gotten to a point where they've gone, stuff it, I want to give this a try.
Mm.
So to them, they don't care what the rest of the world says because they want this, and so they're going to follow it and do it, which is like, bring it on, come on sisters, let's go, let's dance. But the further into dance that people get, the ones that have got years behind them like we do, or who step into a teaching role or into the professional performer role, I don't think we view ourselves the way that the rest of the world views us. Not until the world comes and slaps us in the face.
Yes, and that is actually so true. I've received that feedback from a lot of other dancers who, there's something, a trigger point where you go, oh, am I too old for this now? But it's awful that we actually should feel that way because really, I know how much I've improved since my 20s, 30s, and even 40s. Like, I feel like I'm only just coming really into my authentic self as a performer now. Even though I got away with it for all those years, there's a different confidence or something that comes with age because you go, well, hey, like this is it, this we're at the halfway point. There's something about that. There really is psychologically, and knowing that the changes are occurring in your body, and yeah, it's a wake up call internally, and also the way that you perceive yourself and your role. Like my role isn't to try to be a hot young piece of fluff. Like really, my role when I get out there is to create joy and to entertain. And if we can, I guess, let our audience see that and let people see that part of the dance and understand the power that's in that. But getting there is a whole different train.
Well, let's look at somewhere that has done it though. Flamenco.
Ah, yes.
Everyone is happy to watch the lithe young things, male and female, come out and put it up on the stage. What they're waiting for is the old dame and the old sir in the back corner sitting there beside the musicians watching everyone else dance, because they know the moment that those two dancers, the male or the female, get up and even twitch a finger, they're going to feel something.
Yeah.
And they know they're going to feel something, and they respect that that's going to happen. I think that's where we've got to start aiming at.
Mm.
We need to aim towards the Western dance level of respect for the dance format in general, because
Yeah.
without that, it will never be viewed as a valid format. And that's something I feel very strongly about. I've got things I'm working on to help with that, as I know you do, and so do several others.
Yes.
But when it comes time for performances outside of community dance space, outside of the gig for the baby shower or the wedding because you expect that. We need to start tapping back into the base idea behind the dance. And actually, I just realized I've said the wrong thing in that as well. Like the Awalam ladies who used to take a bride from one household to their husband's household to be married, they weren't necessarily young women.
Mm.
They were the mature women who had the earthly experience to know how to transform a girl through her brideship into her married life. That can't be done with someone who doesn't have experience, who doesn't have emotional investment in movement, emotional investment in life.
Mm.
Those elements have been lost by the show, the
Yes.
stage. And when you look at what goes on a stage, think about Vegas, think about Hollywood. What are they selling? They're selling legs and tits. Hate to say it, but it's true, right? They're selling the dream. They're selling the fantasy. We need people to stop looking for just the fantasy.
Yes.
Because when they start looking for the emotional connection, when you are eating your plate of fattoush and your hummus and your bread and you're getting all of that input, and then you see the dancer, if the dancer doesn't live up to the same level of enjoyment as the food, it falls short.
Mm.
And it shouldn't matter where you are, the dance should always give you more. And the only way you can get more is through long-term study of yourself as a person, as well as the format of dance, of where it comes from, how it integrates into your life. Because, like, my dance life doesn't exist in a bubble.
Mm.
My day job doesn't exist in a bubble. As we're seeing, the two are crossing over very, very prominently here right now. The two of them impact each other. And I take things out of my day job into my dance. I take things out of my dance life into my day job. And occasionally I get to talk about both at once. But all of those elements is what makes me a better performer. Because as you said, you've got that years behind you. You've got all the little tension points in your body that you know better than anybody else. And you know when to pull on one to get that extra bit out, to make something just not like to hear. And all of that emotional elements, that connection is what makes a good dancer great. And generally, I've found you see that more in older dancers. You
Me too.
don't generally see that
It's
in the
not
young
as
ones.
it's not as technical, and I do think that the competition scene has had a huge influence, and so has social media on younger dancers, and it's become complex and technical and party tricks and a lot of that emotion that is so ingrained in the dance and the celebratory aspects of the dance is it's just not there. And it's also interesting too because, we're here in Australia. Australian audiences are not educated audiences in terms of dance. We're still this sporting nation, even though the arts make more money than sports or generate more money than sports. But I think, when we look at Middle Eastern audiences, their attention spans, their richer culture, and growing up with this, there's a different perspective than there is over here. And I think even people who come over don't bring all of that with them.
It's hard to. It's really hard to. Like, how do you tell someone who's never lived within a culture how an element of that culture is important?
Mm.
How do you tell someone who never grew up in Australia that Aussie rules football is what it is? It's hard because you're relying, like, you can tell people the history and you can go, hey, well, it started back here as the VFL and it did, but it's not the same as if you've lived in the culture and you've lived in it to be able to experience that. But you're right. What we see is, I've talked about it to some people before, is dance is like a shag pile carpet. We all had shag. Well, actually, this is where the younger kids might be like a little bit.
It's all
Okay,
right.
so these are
I know what you're
carpets.
talking about. It's okay.
Yeah. But for everyone else, there were these carpets. They were like thick, really thick. Um, you could lose a glass of wine in it and no one would even work out where the wet spot was sometimes. May have done that once. It was very disturbing. But the whole idea of like the shag pile carpet of dance, you can dance on the top of the carpet. And it is pretty and it's nice and you can see it and it's got something and it's showy because it's on the top, right? You can see everything on the top. But where mature dancers come in a lot and where the depth of what we do comes out isn't that top level. It's
Mm,
not the back bends. I mean, they're nice. I can still do them. It's not the splits. I would like to be able to do that one day. It's that character that comes in the depths of putting more into it, knowing the tensions, knowing how you pull. And social media can't show you that because it's not something you can capture on film.
no, no. Even the best dancers struggle to capture that on film. Yeah.
And there's some dancers like Suhaila Selanpour who flat out refuses to release videos of her dancing these days because if you didn't experience live, you're not going to get the same elements out of it
Mm,
because you didn't get the smell of the perfume that the dancer was wearing. You didn't get the anticipation of everyone in the room feeling it as they'd lifted up just before they drop into the next hip drop. Like you don't get that
mm.
texture. And social media takes texture away. We've seen this, right? You sit there and you doom scroll because everything is the same.
Yes.
There's no depth to it.
All the same size. Yeah. So
Yep.
you miss the subtlety and the nuance that you would otherwise see on stage.
Yep. And so, like, just putting even social media aside, audience profiling does the same thing. It puts aside the detail in hold for the whole. So if we are pigeonholing people into age brackets and going, you're too old because you hit that button now that's in the next group up, we're missing the ability to connect to that depth. And we're missing that ability to have people who can bring the depth of their experience. There's a lot of dancers who are still sticking around the edges, but there's so many recently who've dropped off over COVID times and gone, I'm going to retire now. I don't have anything to give. And it was something that actually, it was an interesting thing that came up as part of planning the belly dance convention over the last 2.5 years, was talking to a few of the community who went, I have nothing to give. And
Mm.
I'd be like, why do you have nothing to give? And they're like, we've got nothing, I've got nothing to give because I'm old.
Oh,
And
wow.
it broke my heart to hear people say this because old to me is a state of mind, right? Like you can call me old the day you roll me into the grave. I'm going to be that horrible grandparent if my kids ever have kids that will be, the young hip nana that everyone can't believe is jumping out of a plane at 75, I'm sure. But we don't have, I want to say I don't actually have a non-gendered term for this. So for everyone who gets upset at me using a gendered term, I am sorry in advance. We don't have the matriarchal lines in belly dance in the same way we used to.
Yes.
And because of that, people get to an age point where they're like, well, I can't do gigs anymore. I can do community events, but I've done my share of those. All right, I'm just going to retire because I don't have anything to give. When
Mm.
you do, what you've got to give is a different aspect now to what it was before because you've got a different slew of experience that could help give texture to younger dancers, and I mean younger is in terms of experience, not necessarily age, to help them get over their body positivity issues, or their brain set that says I can't do this, or their the people in the back of their heads, because no one should let anyone else live rent free in your brain, but we do, because social media is a big one of those. But these dancers who've got experience and years behind them, you don't always realize that a simple conversation could unlock that one person who's been living rent free in someone's head and do this. But it happens, right? And it's something that should be celebrated.
Yeah, and we don't even really have those matriarchal structures in society anymore. You know, we're so separated from each other in Australian culture. I think.
Very much so. And this is where we need to rebuild community outside of locational lines, outside of experience lines, outside of who does what format. It doesn't matter. It's all under one big umbrella term currently, because we don't have better names for things, and eventually we may find one, we may not. I don't know. That's still somewhere up there to worry about. But that connection needs to happen, because there's so much support we can give each other to beat out this whole idea that we're not worthy, or we're not something because of what we've seen in social media, or a way we've been profiled in a online sense. Like, we've always been profiled, just to be clear. The internet didn't bring in profiling. We always had it. You've just not been as exposed to it as you are now, when you've got so many inputs coming at you because of the internet and social media. And in fact, every new element that you expose yourself to, all you're doing is building in more points where someone can get at you. And I mean, we've seen what that can do with just a little bit we've got. And I'm not saying you need to stop like across the board, but we need to take stock of what that means, what it means to us as a person, and how we fit into our part of the societal group, but also where we want to be.
Yeah, what are we feeding our brain, but what do we really need for our soul? Yeah.
Exactly. And if you ask me, the answer to that is to dance.
Oh, look, we have the solution to everything right in the palms of our hands and our hips. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this has been a really amazing conversation. And thank you so much for chatting about it, because it just opens up the Pandora's box, but it also opens up a lot of interesting points for discussion. It opens up a lot of points for consideration, to think about, to take into account, and perhaps start to make changes on a personal level, or even a small community level, because as we know, one change
makes waves.
Oh yeah, let's make some waves.
You know what? Let's make a tsunami. Remember, every little bit adds up. So yes. If you and I are already on board to make that change, maybe if other people start doing the same, you just never know what's going to happen.
Okay, time for a tsunami, everybody. Bring it on. If you'd like to keep up with more conversations on this topic, click like and subscribe so you can be notified of when the next one goes up.